Most everyone moves to Panama to get away from someplace, someone or something in their lives that they think Panama will remedy. But does it? Panama offers us an escape from the harsh reality of the first world, a refuge for us refugees. In Panama you can easily find many places that time forgot. Or a vibrant, modern, high-tech city similar to Miami. But we ran away from Canada, after 28 years there, to Panama, because we thought it was a safe place for our lifelong romance to thrive, unhindered by our lifelong tormentors. And it has, as you'll see in this video. Panama is a very romantic place, without the stress of first world living, with a wonderful climate, no hurricanes, ample rain, it's green all year round, with tropical fruits and flowers, monkeys and sloths, birds and butterflies too. Plus it's much more affordable. We sold everything in BC Canada, Kauai, Florida and Montana, then along with our sons and little red Sheba, Happy, started the 23-day, 11,000 kilometers drive south, to Panama. That was in 2006, almost 20 years ago now in 2025. So did our romance flourish in Panama? Watch and you'll see. By now you may have guessed that the more fragile of Jen and Jenny, was Jen, my first love, and that suddenly she needed rescuing, urgently. We were at UCT, she was 19, in her second year, me 20 in my first year. My residence was the one on the right, Smuts Hall. The one on the left, Fuller Hall, was the girls' residence. We were spending as much time together as was practical, studying together each night, in my residence room, for several hours, 45 minutes at a stretch, then taking off 15 minutes to cuddle and chat, and well, you know. Often the 15 minutes stretched to an hour or more. I'd noticed that Jen was becoming pensive, still warm, but very needy, fragile, and I just could not quite figure out why suddenly she was so emotional. Often she'd just lie on her back, on my bed, staring at the ceiling, quiet, morose, sighing, but still secretive. Pregnancy was a possible cause, and it had entered my mind, but it turns out that was not the reason for her melancholy. So what was? Frustrated, I took her for a drive around Chapman's Peak, which is a lot like the area around Positano in Italy, or the Amalfi Coast. As I drove, her sitting next to me, looking away, clearly sad, she started to cry. So I found a rest stop overlooking Hout Bay, which during the week, was empty, and parked overlooking the beautiful ocean, bay and mountains. We got out and walked over to the edge of the cliff. I hugged her, then taking her face in my hands, looking deep into her eyes, said, "What's wrong, Jen? What's happened to make you so sad? Is it me? Are you unsure of my love for you? Maybe you're having second thoughts." Jen broke down and cried. Standing there, I just held her, letting her bury her face in my chest, wetting my shirt, then I pressed her again, "Please tell me. So I can help you. Please Jen, tell me what's up." Jen, still sobbing, through her tears, her head still on my chest, started to confess.
I'd become very sad, as I kept Mother's plans to separate us from each other, once again, to myself.
I'd feared that if he found out we'd again be separated, Ian would maybe leave me.
I really didn't want that. Now I realized that I couldn't hide the truth from him any longer.
Fearing the end of our love story, I winced as I softly replied, "Ian, Mother is planning to separate us once again. She's told me to quit university, that they were all emigrating to Canada, and me, not 21 yet, has no choice but to go with them, leaving you, my darling Ian, alone once again in Cape Town, heartbroken. I don't want to leave you, Ian. I've always loved you, you know that.
We have such a long loving, and now even intimate romantic history.
But Mother's demanding that since we're not even engaged, it's time to end our relationship, so that I will go with them and we can all make a fresh start, in Canada.
I realize this must come as a shock to you, as it did to me weeks ago. It's happened to us so often.
Mother just doesn't want us to stay together, but Ian, I do. But I'll understand if you use this as an opportunity to let go of me, to distance yourself from me, to finally escape Mother's repeated cruelty, emotionally.
That likely will never end.
But Ian, I'm not sure how I'll ever recover from that.
My happiness, even my life, is now in your hands. I'm not being dramatic or manipulative, I'm being honest, it just is. I just don't want to live without you by my side, loving me. All of this high-stakes drama is no fault of yours, or mine.
Mother's initiating all of this, once again. Maybe you can come with me to Canada?
I'd love that very much. But I'll understand if you don't want to.
You've suffered long enough, along with me, us both fighting desperately for our right to love each other. So far we've succeeded in keeping our love alive, just maybe we can do so again?
Mother was planning to separate us once again. She'd told Jen to quit university, that they were all emigrating to Canada, and Jen, not 21 yet, had no choice but to go with them, leaving me in Cape Town. So we'd be about as far away from each other as one can possibly get in the world. Through her tears, she told me that she didn't want to leave me, that she loved me, but that her mother had said that since we were not even engaged, it was time to end our relationship, so that she could go and make a fresh start in Canada, along with them. I was in shock, but motivated to think creatively. I disengaged a little, holding her hands, looking at my emotional Jen, keeping eye contact, and what happened next came naturally. Jen, we've loved each other for so many years now, since you were 15, and we've overcome a lot of obstacles to our love, dealt with a lot of sadness, always imposed on us by your mother, and well, here we go again. I love you, Jen, I always have, I always will. I've always known we'd end up married, and I think, so have you. Not knowing any of this, I didn't come prepared with a ring or a speech, but if it's okay with you, can we get the ring later? After I propose? You can choose your own ring then. From the angelic, happy smile that suddenly arose on her face, through her tears, I knew exactly what to do. Jen, please, oh please, say you'll be my wife. Please let me love you, and only you, for as long as we both live. I've always loved you, Jen, from the very first time our eyes met. Now Jen, still with tears in her eyes, was smiling.
Genuinely surprised at this turn of events, looking at Ian, still with tears in my eyes, I managed a weak smile and softly replied, "Yes, Ian, I want to spend my life with you, all of it, long or short. I want to be your wife, so yes, yes.
I accept your proposal."
Ian, now you have to formally ask my dad for my hand in marriage.
Oh no, Jen. You know she hates me. Why should we give her a veto over our love story? I proposed, and you happily accepted. Surely that's enough.
Yes, Ian. So let's outsmart her.
She's been expecting you to leave me, rather than propose to me. We need to wait till I have my ring. Then we'll surprise them, Sunday after church, when they'll all be home.
When we walk in, I'll proudly show Mother my ring, announcing that we're engaged. However, right away you've got to request to talk to my dad in his study, before Mother is able to take him aside and manipulate him into refusing you permission to marry me. If you get Dad on his own and plead our love's cause, I think he'll give us permission to get married. I still expect Mother to veto me staying in Cape Town with you, even if Dad gives his consent, but for now, this is our best hope.
I told Jen that since she knew how her family works, I'd go along with her plan. I'd always found her dad way easier to deal with than her mother anyway. Then I suggested to Jen that we should now concentrate on shopping for her ring. Jen's mood had lifted. She was happy, relieved, full of hope, her smudged makeup the only clue that she'd been crying, but her eyes were now dry, full of life again, and she was smiling, excited. I reassured her that I loved her, and that somehow our love would triumph, as it always had, to which she replied,
I love you. I love you so much.
Please, Ian, hold me close to your heart forever, and never, ever, ever, let me go.
46 years later, I still love and adore Jen, so much. I've always held her close. I've never, ever let her go, and I never, ever, will. Jen was right. By springing the surprise on her mother, and flashing her ring under mother's nose to keep her preoccupied, she became so flustered, her plan having failed, so distracted that I was able to finesse Jen's dad into his study, alone, before she could stop us. Without his wife present, he was agreeable to my request.
When he came to our home to formally ask for our daughter's hand in marriage, I invited him into my study, pouring us each a beer. We sat down next to the fireplace, and I chatted to him about his feelings for my daughter, which I already knew were sincere. Ian came from a good family.
Then, asking me to leave, called Jen into his study, alone, denying his wife's request to be present. Wisely he wanted to hear what Jen really wanted, without me or her mother being there to influence her in any way. Asking Jen if she was sure this was what she wanted, Jen answered,
Yes, Daddy, I love Ian. I've loved him for many years already, you know that to be true.
I want to be his wife, to have children with him, for us to be a loving couple.
Please give us permission to marry. Please give us your blessing.
Then he called us all into his office and announced that he was giving Jen and me his permission to be married. Mother was furious, but only temporarily defeated. She immediately demanded that we wait to get married, that we do so in Canada, after they'd settled there, likely years into the future. That seemed reasonable to her dad, so he supported her on that.
My wife insisted there'd be no wedding in Africa. Jenny would have to come with us to Canada first for any wedding to happen. But really, I knew she was just stalling. Ian was the reason for Jenny's first ever no to her. Jenny's rebellious disloyal act could not be rewarded. So I knew she'd really meant there would be no wedding for them, ever, but I didn't want to upset the happy young couple, yet.
Foolishly we agreed, just happy to have secured her dad's permission to marry. In hindsight, what we should have done, is announce our engagement and feign Jen's pregnancy. In South Africa, at the time, that mandated a rushed wedding. But we were just so innocent, way too trusting. As you can surmise from this photo taken at Niagara Falls, in winter, late December of 1978, Jen, a captive of her mother there for 9 months without me, her fiancé, alone in faraway Cape Town, the path to the altar for us was anything but smooth. I traveled to Canada to rescue Jen in December of 1978. Once there I applied for a marriage license for us. We'd planned to marry there, then return, or if need be, elope back to Cape Town. But Jen's mother never had any intentions of letting us ever get married, just the opposite. She'd found out from Jen's sister about our plans, then with the element of surprise on her side, threw us out of her house on Christmas Eve, literally into the cold, icy and snowy night, which there starts in mid-afternoon. That forced us to waste my precious rescue fund on a hotel, to survive, and so within days I had to return to Cape Town, alone, my fiancée still her mother's captive in faraway Canada. But then Jen, realizing that all Mother was doing was stalling, lulled her mother into a false sense of victory, whilst she planned her escape. Courageously, after 9 months of captivity in Canada, Jen ran away from Mother, flying from Toronto first to London Heathrow, then the next day to Cape Town to be reunited with me in one of the most joyous days of our lives. Jen's mother, then 48, was furious, vowing that her dad would not be allowed to walk her down the aisle, and that no family of Jen's would attend her wedding. There would be no dress or help with wedding costs. Jen was officially disowned for her rebellion. Mother died in September of 2024, at 93, in faraway Canada. She never changed. Jen was mentioned in her will, but only to send her one last spiteful message from beyond the grave, a poison apple. I intercepted that will, and will never let Jen read it, or tell her what that poisonous last message was. Jen is not the first runaway bride in her family's African history, she's the 4th. She got married to me using the ring of the first runaway bride, her paternal great-grandma, Rose French, who'd run away from her mother in England, to marry Reverend John Harvey in Africa. What we didn't know, for 5 decades, is that we were married in her grandpa's old church, Rose Bank Methodist Church. With, unbeknownst to us, his photo on the wall, top left. Looking protectively down over Jen signing the marriage registry, bereft of any family present, her mother's spiteful revenge. And with that same ring that great-grandma Rose, and later Jen's paternal granny had used. But her family, great-granny Rose French, Jen's great-aunts and granny, were there with Jen and I, in spirit, as they'd been countless Sundays as Reverend John Harvey preached his sermons in the 1890s, a century before. As well, as the result of an underappreciated biological anomaly, her paternal granny, young as she was back then, listening to her dad preach, already had all the eggs in her ovaries she'd ever have, one of which was Jen's dad. So in a rather strange way, her dad was there too with them all. When Jen found all of this out, during COVID 5 decades later, after her dad died, after 2 separate breast cancers, she broke down and wept, saying, "If only I'd known back then." Well, now she does.